Do you have visions and dreams and lofty ideas and ideals for what's possible for yourself and the world, but struggle sometimes because so many other people don't see it that way and don't believe it's possible? This video is going to help you if you have big dreams, big goals, and kind of struggle sometimes feeling like you're an outcast or like you're weird or different because everybody around you doesn't agree, doesn't think it's possible, and always kind of wants to tell you what you're not going to be able to do for yourself or the world. Everything in our reality is just belief. It's all belief. It's like a quantum generalized consensus of what is real and what is possible. Nothing is objectively real. Reality comes from subjectively believing this is reality and therefore it is. We create our own reality to an extent because there's two realities. There's the collective reality and the individual reality. And the individual can create their own reality to a degree past the collective reality. But when you start to go a little too far, the collective reality pulls you back, which can be very frustrating for people with vision and farsightedness and lots of creativity and lofty dreams and ideas for what's possible for them and the planet. You can only go so far, and then the collective's like, no, we're not going that far. It starts to pull you back. And like me, I've gotten very, very angry at the collective. I've gotten very, very angry at what the majority of people think and believe to be true and real and how they perceive reality. Do you relate to this? Do you ever find yourself like with ideas and beliefs and visions for your life, and then because of the world we live in and how it's structured, you can't get them done, or you can't really catch a break without pushing really, really, really hard, or the people in your life and around you tell you, no, that's not possible. It's almost like an act of divine rebellion to hold a vision. For me, this has been a very difficult lesson, because since I was little, I had a tendency to have these very large visions and fantasies. But when we get traumatized, like I did, we have a tendency to get sort of lost in the fantasy and what we call dissociative thinking, right? Where you're not really present with your nervous system and you're just sort of walking around feeling all these things that aren't happening that you think will happen one day. But then as a result of, all the work I've done to come back down to earth, there are a lot of other people that will call those visions or fantasies, ridiculous. And I've been very obsessed on finding the bridge between the two, because ultimately, like I'm talking about, like reality is created by fantasy. We visualize, envision something, believe it to be so. Often the people that change or make the biggest contributions have these beliefs and visions that go up against the norm and have to succeed in spite of them. And it can be tricky to find that balance of like step by step in the moment, holding on to your vision while embracing things as they are, and the resistance that comes from the consensus. Because if we're too resentful of the collective, we avoid actually learning the rules and laws and structures that are, because we want to just go ahead and create our own. But the problem with that is you can't really innovate rules if you don't know what the rules are, right? You can't add to a painting if you don't even look at the painting. You can't paint a picture that everyone's going to love if you refuse to use any of the colors on the palette of what humans see in terms of color. You can't just go create your own thing completely on your own. And you can only go as far as people are going to go with you. My point is, everything is just based on perception. There's no real right or wrong. And if you come up against a large group of people that believe something, if there's like 15 people that believe something very strongly, and there's only one of you, you're going to almost seem kind of wrong by default. Like you're not wrong because there's no wrong. This is how it's been throughout history, like that lone voice of sanity in the wilderness against the crazy, insane mob. Like the mobs get going with all this emotion and perception, and it doesn't mean anything. But because there's so much energy behind it, your energy field, in contrast, feels sort of weaker in a way, which makes holding your vision more of an act of courage and alignment and strength, right? I noticed this when I was in rehab. I was in a really good rehab, but the guy who ran it didn't know everything. He didn't. He oftentimes seemed to think like he did. But he was the god of that group because it was his place. And most everyone else would just go along with what he thought, because if they didn't, they would get in trouble. So when we'd be in a group or something, he would come in and be like, this is how it is. And then like 15, 20 other people would be like, yes, this is how it is. And no matter what the one person, who was often me, but would say, it would just look like that person's wrong. And, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I was sometimes, I wasn't other times. But the point is, there's this massive amount of collective consensus energy behind this perception, and only a little bit behind the individual perception, which, like in terms of like a magnet, there's much more pull here than there is here. And so it's very easy to get discouraged and quit and give up. And the keys are this. We want to do a combination of things. Humans have a tendency to think they're capable of way less than they are. So we tend to default to, I can't really go this far, when we actually can, because the consensus believes that. And we want to be careful not to identify too much with what everybody says is real. Everyone says it is this way, right? I believe if everyone believed we could fly, we would. And everybody will be like, no, that's not possible. You're insane. You're fucking crazy. Everyone knows it is this way. And the truth is, no, everyone doesn't know it's this way. Everyone thinks it's this way, and therefore it is. But to go believe you could fly and jump off a building is kind of stupid, because you're probably not going to pull it off. You're probably just going to fall to your death, right? So it's about kind of understanding where the reality is and fitting into the reality enough to move it forward without betraying your vision, without betraying your dreams, your goals, and your ideals, and also understanding that some of the difficulty comes from that pull with the collective. But when you do hold that vision, which may never come to pass, it depends on what it is. I mean, you might have a vision for the planet, living in global peace and harmony and an enlightened civilization. You might not see that in your lifetime, right? Which kind of sucks. But holding that vision is truly an act of divinity. And even if you die having had these perceptions and beliefs that the collective never caught up to, you actually are doing something. You are making a difference. You're blazing trails into the energetic structure of our reality that are going to make it easier and easier and easier at some point to hit the critical mass where those realities start to occur. And maybe you will see some of them. It depends on what they are, right? We all tend to get discouraged because we don't understand the honor in simply holding that space in spite of what everyone else thinks, because we're also very result and goal oriented in terms of seeing concrete success in our physical reality. We don't credit the visionary energetics that are actually reality also. And of course, like kind of the game of life is to embody and to ground your vision and make it real when you can, of course. But just because the vision hasn't happened yet, or you don't see it yet, does not in any way, shape, or form mean it's not making a difference. So if you have a tendency to let other people's thoughts or beliefs influence you, be careful. Know that their structure, there's no concrete objective validity to their structure. It's just their programming is what's trying to pull you back into what they believe to be normal. And you can give up and let them win, or you can hold your vision anyway and see where it takes you. Because regardless of what is collectively possible yet or not, right, holding the highest vision for yourself, so long as you're grounded enough in reality, is always going to lead you much, much, much further into a much better life and world than if you crap out on it, right? Than if you just give up on it. What are some examples of this, right? Well, right now, the planet's going through this major transition, and all the darkness is kind of coming up and coming to the surface. And there's a lot of people out there who are just running around screaming bloody murder and fear, and the sky is falling, and AI is going to take over, and the powers that be are going to clamp down and control all of us. And what they're doing is they're taking their vision that's only going to here, and it's in fear and trauma, and they're projecting that collectively. It is or isn't necessarily going in that direction. I believe very strongly that all the darkness is coming up, but ultimately that's not the reality we're going to create, and it's basically beyond any of us, really. It's kind of like divine law, like light wins this time. But what we can do is not buy into that. Like, fuck that shit. Like, AI is like money. It's like, it's not dark or light. It's what we imbue it with. So you can either run away from it and abandon it, or allow like the more manipulative, darker agendas to take over, or imbue it with light. And that starts with your vision. And it's hard to hold that vision out of the fear when everybody else is screaming fear. And this is what's coming. It's like, that's just your perception. You're just creating to a general consensus of what's coming. And if enough people hop on board that consensus, it could happen. I don't think it will anyway, but it could, because that is how it's structured. So the real divine rebels will hold that space for a very divine, loving, and peaceful society to unfold in spite of whatever's going to come up. And that's the challenge. We all have that challenge individually. And that's not to say there isn't truth to some of that stuff, because there is. There is a lot of darkness. There are a lot of dark forces on this planet. But the trick is to stay out of it. It's the perception. It doesn't matter if you're for it or against it. If you're fighting it, you are it. And it's like this balancing act. It really is. It's like walking on a fucking razor blade thin tightrope, where you can't deny it, because if you don't acknowledge that it's there, you can't shift it. So you want to acknowledge that it's there without sinking into it and becoming it. You want to be like, yes, I see you. I see those are potentials. I see there's some truth to some of that. But I'm staying up here. That's the essence of divine neutrality. Because from a certain plane, the dark and the light are the same. That's divine neutrality. I can come down and I can observe, well, there's light and there's the dark. And ultimately, it all is just one. And I can live in the reality where there's still some polarity and duality and not become it. I can emit my own frequency and my own vision and pay attention a little to it without rejecting it and running from it and pretending like it's not there and living in a la fairyland world where I don't face my fears and I don't face the challenges of life, but without being beaten down by it and told things aren't possible and told that I'm crazy and told that I'm weird, and listening to that. Just remember that. No one really knows anything. And those who just believe what everyone else is believing, it's just fear. They just don't yet. There's nothing wrong with them. It's not a judgment, but they don't yet have the courage or awareness to think outside the box and to understand that by perpetually thinking out of the box, that's how the box breaks. Let me know how that goes for you. Please let me know if you have any comments, any revelations, any breakthroughs. Please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot. I'm going to be adding some opportunities to do discovery calls soon. If anybody has any interest in some of my one-on-one and group coaching programs, there's not going to be a lot of them. Stay tuned for that. And until next time, thank you so much.